Hey everybody, this is SQL Dan, and today we're going to look at distinct versus group by in Snowflake. Why do we have two keywords that seem to do exactly the same thing? Let's explore. Okay, for the data set here, I'm using my baseball data set. It's just 162 records, and it looks like this. And we're just going to do some grouping on the month field to keep this nice and simple. So let's start with the basics here, and let's just select the distinct values from the month field. Okay, and when I run this query, we'll see that we got 7 records back, the months of March through the months of April. Now the interesting thing is that we could also run a query, and instead of using distinct, I can remove distinct here, and instead I can say group by month. And if I run this query, we will see that it returns exactly the same records. March through September, 7 months, one for each one. And what's even more interesting is that if we look at the explain plan for each of these, we'll see that these are identical as well. Okay, so let's start with the explain plan for the distinct. Like so. And if I run this, this is the explain plan. You don't have to be an expert here because what I want to show you is that both of these queries are going to have exactly the same explain plan, but essentially you read this from the bottom up and it's doing a table scan to collect the data, then it's aggregating the data by using this month field, and then it's returning the result. So let's do the same thing with the group by query here, and voila, we see exactly the same results. So what is the difference between these two anyway? Why is it that we have two different keywords? Well, there are two reasons why you would use one or the other. And the first is if you would like to do something that involves an aggregated function, such as count, min, max, average, and sum. So I'm going to paste this statement right here that we just ran, and we'll just do a count. And you can see that we got the same 7 months, but we also got now a count of how many records are in each one of those months. So that's where the group by comes in. Now let's compare that to what happens with a distinct. And again, I'll paste the distinct query in here. And let's try to do a count again, just like we did with the group by. And when I run this, we get an error. Because in order to use this aggregated function, we have to have a group by. It will not allow me to use distinct in this case. I have to have a group by. So the first difference is that if you want to use an aggregated function, you must have a group by. Now there is another distinction here, and this one is probably a little bit more interesting. Let's again paste these two queries. Okay, and now let's change this count from, instead of it being an aggregation function, let's change it into an analytic function by adding the keyword over. And let's partition by the same field that we're using for the grouping, which is partition by month. Okay, and I'm just going to give it an alias of C for count. And when I run this, we see that we get a list of all the months and we get a count of 1. Now let's contrast that to what happens when I run this with distinct. Again, same function. Oh, let me take out this count right here because that will return an error. There we go. In this case, now we get a count of how many records were in each month. We had 4 records in March, 26 in April, etc., etc. So you can see here that these two returned different results. The group by returned ones all the way down, and the distinct seems to have returned a count, much like the group by did with the aggregation count from before. So what's going on here? Why does this happen? The answer has to do in the order that the functions are executed. Because if we take a look at the order of operations in SQL, we see that the group by occurs before an analytic function and the distinct occurs after an analytic function. So what we really have going on here when we run this group by query, let's just go ahead and paste this down. Okay, and I'm going to not do the group by. We're just going to run this query with the count. Okay, and so we can see 4 records for March, and we can see a count of 4 on each one, just like we would expect the analytic function to do. And then we can see what happens to be 26 records for April and a 26 on each one. So this function is being executed and it's returning those values. And then when we add the distinct to it, effectively what we're asking for is for any unique combinations of these 2 fields that exist in the result set. So the unique combinations of month and this result that I've aliased as C. So we have March and 4. Now we have 4 of them, but there's only one distinct combination of March and 4. And then April and 26, and again there's 26 of them, but there's only one. Okay, so when we add the distinct to it and we run it, what we end up with is something that looks suspiciously like the group by query with the aggregate function earlier. To contrast that, when instead of doing the distinct, if we did it with the group by instead, that's when we ended up with all of the ones. And the reason is because the group by occurred first. And so we had 1 record for each month, and then the count is returning how many it found in the result set. So this is a major difference between distinct and group by, is when it occurs and the results that will happen. So again, 2 differences between group by and distinct. The first is that if you want to use an aggregate function, you must have a group by. If instead you're using an analytic function, you'll get different results between the 2 based on the order of execution. And let me just show you very quickly the execution plans of these. Okay, so we can see here that this one with the group by, again, it's collecting the data, and we read from the bottom. The aggregation occurs next, then the window function, and finally we get the result. And let's contrast that with the distinct logic. And in this case, reading from the bottom again, we do the table scan to collect the data, then the count, that's the analytic function, occurs, and then the aggregation or the finding of the unique values occurs. And so you can see it in the explain plan how that's happening. So that's my look at the difference between distinct and group by. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you learned something from this video, please give a like so that YouTube will share this video with other people as well. And if you're enjoying my content, I'd be honored to have you as a subscriber to my channel. Thanks for watching. This is SQL Dan saying goodbye until next time.